Going live. Got the targeting reticule with the front 242 effect, at least for the next little while. Hello, Gabberlux. Good to see you. The last D&D supplement. That's right. The last one ever released for original D&D. Hey, good Monday to you. How are you guys doing today? I'm doing just fine. We got kind of a mixed bag today. We're just going to kind of talk some smack, talk about a few things. Nothing major to get into before we jump forward into our next great series of segments. Speaking of which, tomorrow begins the live first edition AD&D game for you guys. That's right. I'll be streaming a game. I've got me a handful of participants, and we're going to learn some of those concepts and some of those things we talked about for many, many weeks in the How to Play AD&D series. This will be a continuation of that, but you guys are going to get to see it in practice as we actually play some AD&D. And unlike other Dungeons and Dragons live streams out there, the players, their characters, may actually die. I almost said the players may actually die. We never know where life is going to take us or when it's going to end, but I won't be the agency of the players' deaths. But the characters, hey, we could have a TPK day one. You never know. But we'll see. And if you like playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but you never get a chance to, folks, we are less than 200 subs away from the Great Underground Virtual Gaming Convention. That's right. The Great Underground Virtual Gaming Convention. And if you're coming to the channel new, if you're just stopping by here, if you're just checking it out, maybe the YouTube analytics put it up. Maybe you're coming over because I put up a couple links on Facebook. Maybe you've been subbed, but you never checked one of these videos out before. When I hit 1,000 subs on this channel, we are going to celebrate that. We are going to celebrate that with a virtual gaming convention, the Great Underground Virtual Gaming Con. And we're going to play some original D&D, some advanced D&D. I'll probably run some Twilight 2000. I'll definitely run some Tales from the Loop. If we can figure out how to play Fight in the Skies or Dungeon in a virtual sense, we'll do that. But it's going to be all kinds of fun. So please, if you haven't, like, subscribe, click the bell icon for notifications. Help us get that engagement up. Help us get those sub numbers up. Because when we hit 1,000, we all celebrate together with a virtual gaming con. Now, if I happen to get 1,000 between, say, now and mid-December, I don't think I'm going to try and do a virtual con just before Christmas. I think that would be a bit much on everybody's holiday schedule. But otherwise, we'll do it almost as quickly as we get the 1,000 subs. So I just want to go down. Hey, Ricky. I said hello to Gabber. Paul, yes, one you lock the target. That was an interesting overlay. The viewfinder there. My camera doesn't like to make it go away very quickly. And I don't know all the menu settings to go in and quickly make it disappear. So it stays up for a minute unless I was to go over and adjust something on the camera, and then it would all come back. It would all come back. But that's fine. We're not worried about that. Adam Black. It's a knick-knack, Adam Black. Give the dog a bone. Anyway. Vzwiki. Good to see you. Chris Kane. Hello. Some interesting discussion going on this morning in the Discord. You know, I'm always late to the party. It seems like these days. And I get on the Discord and people were talking about a couple of things that were of interest to me. But before I get to those, I did want to mention, if you saw the thing where I said talking about armor making, for Halloween, my daughter wants to go as a video game character. And this video, it's a fantasy video game, and they require armor. So I've been 3D printing up these armor segments for her, and I gotta sand these so they'll stay together a little bit better. But like this is the breastplate, and I have the back half of the breastplate, and then I've got some. I'm sacrificing a couple of my old canvas belts to hold the armor on. It's gonna be neat. It's gonna be fun. So that's what I've been doing, and I gotta clean these up big time, file and sand and so on and etc. to get them looking better than they currently are. But that's my plan for today, to sand those and get them cleaned up and get everything, get like there's bolt holes where the belts will attach and all. Nailed the pronunciation. Tenkar always botches it. Well, I'm just better than Eric Tenkar in that respect, aren't I? But anyhow, so yeah, that's the armor making that's going on. I wish I had. What can I? Oh no, I can't reach it. But like I said, there's a back to the pieces as well. So I gotta figure that out. And I'll get that all sanded, cleaned up today, assembled, and then painted. And then for Halloween, she will be ready to go. They're having a costume Halloween party at a camping trip for her Girl Scout troop, and she's very excited. She's bought all the other bits herself, but the old man, Dad, said, hey, I'll make you a breastplate with my 3D printer over there. So that's what I've been doing as of late. Had some misprints. I've got like 5 pounds of chunks of misprinted PLA over there, and it makes me sad because there's nothing to do with them. I mean, I guess in some grand future you could buy like a renderer where you would just take your misprints and throw them in and it would just make new filament for you. I mean, how cool would that be? You know, just a perfect replicator type system where it's like, oh, that misprinted, just pry that off the build plate, chuck it into your renderer, and then it just makes more PLA for you. I've seen a couple of projects that are going in that direction, but we're not there yet, not by any stretch of the imagination. There's heating and chemical processes in there that you don't want to have in your home. So I'm going to get this cleaned up, put together, and maybe painted today. I don't know. But in the next day or two, then have it mounted on the canvas belts, which are really hard to find. Like I think, oh, canvas belt, that's just a cheap thing you can get at like Target or Walmart. Yeah, no. I don't know if it's the season. I don't know if it's the supply issues that are going on worldwide. But yeah, I can't find any canvas belts anywhere. But anyway, that's my burden to deal with. Hello, Damien. Good to see you. Good to see you. And it's good to see everyone, man. So anyhow, yeah, so a little late to the party this morning and getting onto the, I was looking around and I actually thought, well, maybe I can just spend the whole day making the armor. Maybe I can just not worry about, I'll just post up a message and say, hey, no live stream today. I got this project. And I'm sure you guys would have understood. I think you're a fairly reasonable crowd. And you go, no stream today. It's the exception, not the rule. Whatever, Bill's got stuff going on, I'll do something else for lunch today instead of listening to his live stream. But a couple of things came up today, and this is something I've been wanting to talk about, and I'm not going to rant about it very much. This isn't going to be a rant. This isn't going to be like a week ago this past Friday when I really kind of laid into Wizards of the Coast. But it's sort of a subset of that, and it's something that I've talked about for a while now. I want to read something to you guys real quick that I've read before. If you're new to the channel, you might not have heard this before. But if you've been coming here a long time, you've heard me talk about this before. And I want to read this. This is something that Mike Carr wrote in 1978. This is the introduction, the foreword, rather, to the Player's Handbook. Now, one thing I do know is that Gary was very particular about his works and his words. I mean, he wrote these books. All right. For all the bloviating and hand-wringing and tearing down of Gary that people seem to enjoy doing, you know, oh, well, I heard it was really Bob Bledsaw that wrote, and I heard that, you know, he like didn't credit a bunch of people. First of all, he gives ample credit in the books. And second of all, these are his works. But he wouldn't put something in the books written by someone else if he didn't agree with it. Gary was not a rubber stamp kind of guy. All right. So going forward with that, I want to read you this. This is the second paragraph, the foreword of the Player's Handbook. Page 2 of the Player's Handbook, if you want to read it along. Page 2, paragraph 2. D&D players happily come in all shapes and sizes, and even a fair number of women are counted among those who regularly play the game, making Dungeons & Dragons somewhat special in this regard. The widespread appeal cuts across many boundaries of interest and background, which means that D&D players are marked by a wide range of diversity. In fact, one could easily use the analogy that there are as many types of D&D players as there are D&D monsters. After that, draw your own conclusions. There are unquestionably fast players, slow players, clever players, foolish players, cautious players, reckless players, generous players, greedy players, friendly players, and obnoxious players. And unfortunately, I think we all know about that latter category, right? As diverse as this melange of enthusiasts is, they all seem to share one commonality. A real love for Dungeons and Dragons and a devotion that few other games can claim. This remarkable loyalty is a great factor in the game's explosion of popularity, and players in expanding group and Dungeons & Dragons has become a gaming cult, and as avid D&Ders have ceaselessly spread the gospel, enrolling new players in expanding groups, which just seems to grow and grow. Now, why did I bother reading 2 paragraphs, stumbling over myself more than a couple of times? Why did I launch into this when I've said it before? D&D has always been there for the D&D enthusiast. Always. I don't care if it's 2nd edition, basic D&D, original D&D, 1st edition advanced D&D, which is mine of favor. It's always been there. It's always been there for us. No DM worth his salt has ever taken a look at your average presentable Joe and said, I don't want you at my table, based on absolutely nothing at all. All right? D&D has always been inclusive. You know, from the 1990s to now, D&D's presentation in media has been checkered. Now, I love the community episode, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I haven't seen the follow-up episode, but the first one is a classic. But let's face it, it spoofs a lot of tropes about playing Dungeons and Dragons. And that's fine, because while I'm not a huge fan of Dan Harmon, I do know that it's coming from a place of love. If you've seen the episode, but you don't really know the background, the plastic milk crate of D&D books that Pierce Hawthorne's character buys, first of all, they're all first edition books. And second of all, that's Dan Harmon's box of role-playing game material. He brought that to the set and said, use this as a prop. Okay? It's not 4 ebooks. It's not 3. It's first edition AD&D. Dan Harmon loves AD&D, and he insisted the D&D not be a background thing or just a couple of one-off jokes in that episode. He fought to get that episode made, and he said it has to be just like I wrote it. But the best presentation I've ever seen of D&D games in television is the final episode of Freaks and Geeks, when the cool guy sits down and plays Carlos the Dwarf and loves it, and at the end of it asks if they can play again the next day. The cool guy falls in love with first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and plays it and enjoys it. Now, to my mind, the way a lot of D&D seems to go these days, the direction that modern new D&D seems to go these days, is the cool guy and 6 of his cool guy friends show up. They play D&D among themselves while the geeks just stand there and watch, and eventually realize they're not going to get asked to play in their own hobby, and then shuffle off to find another hobby until those 6 people pick up and come over to it and sit down. I don't mind that the so-called beautiful people show up to play Dungeons and Dragons, or people that I have literally never heard of in my life. And I'm not talking about play. I'm not like, if I had 1 million subs on this channel and every day I had 1 million people in the stream watching the channel, I still would not be able to interact with them all. And even if I could, I would still not be scratching maybe 1/10 of the people who have ever played D&D, or 1/20th of the people. So when I say people I've never heard of, I'm not talking about just other gamers. I'm talking about people who popped up in the hobby, and it seems to have started around the mid-2010s. But people who just sprang up as authorities in old school gaming, in whatever kind of gaming. And it's that kind of game tourism that irritates me. It's fine to come in and sit down and play. It's something else entirely to say, well, look, I'm the expert on this. But that's kind of a different rant. But it's parallel to it. It's when you look up. Now, I just read a couple of paragraphs about diversity of players, all right? And I'm going to kind of twist things around. I'm going to play the Uno reverse card here for a second, guys. Because how often have we as gamers been told, well, your hobby is not diverse enough? Well, the hobby's always been diverse. I just read the paragraph that explains that the Dungeons and Dragons hobby is diverse. Now, I can't control what other people do at their tables. I can't, and I wouldn't pretend to. But when you look up today, what is the most popular thing in Dungeons and Dragons in its outward facing form? Well, Objectively, if you go by sheer dollars, it's Critical Role. By the number of eyes and the amount of money, it's Critical Role. And there are other people other than Critical Role who have pushed their way into, in front of the camera, so to speak. And they brought like the Instagram and TikTok vision of being a D&D player. And these beautiful people, for lack of a better term, have kind of made themselves the center of attention. And irrespective of addition, I don't think that betters the hobby. Looking at the cast of Critical Role, and let's be very clear about two things. One, I appreciate the grift, okay? Matt Mercer and that bunch are making something approaching like 1990s level sitcom money for Critical Role. Early 1990s anyway. I appreciate the grift. If I woke up tomorrow and somebody was paying me $9 million a year, yeah, that's right, $9 million a year, to sit here for an hour, hour and a half, 5 days a week and rant in my little studio here to you guys, I would certainly not hesitate to do it. I appreciate the grift. But let's be 100% clear about something, okay? Well, about this thing. Critical Role is not Dungeons and Dragons. Show me an episode of Critical Role when 20 minutes into a game, there's a total party kill, and the rest of the night is spent rolling up new characters. But that's not the case. Critical Role has story arcs and seasons. That's why I said 1990s, Chris. Anyway, this group of people, they're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. They have seasons, they have scripts, they have long-lasting characters. It was such a huge deal when one character died 3 or 4 years ago that, like, the fandom of Critical Role, which includes a lot of people who would never play Dungeons and Dragons, just watch Critical Role. And I know this because I've seen people say this. I've seen people in the Critical Role fandom say, well, I don't play D&D and I would never play D&D, but Critical Role is so much fun. There were people up in arms over the death of this character. Like, you don't understand that is the norm, not the exception. It's not like a TV show where Dungeons and Dragons, proper Dungeons and Dragons, is not a TV show where players get written scripts and the director, the DM, says, okay, listen, I've got a really dramatic death plan for you, or it's going to seem like your character's going to die, but then I'm going to bring you back. D&D is a spontaneous outgrowth of things. And I'm getting a little off track here by talking about Critical, because it's not just about Critical Role, but Critical Role is all beautiful people. All right? I mean, look at me. I am a pear with a farmer's tan who wears genre t-shirts. You think Matt Mercer would call up somebody who looks like me? Not me. Not me. Just somebody who looks like me and say, yeah, I'll put you on camera for 3 hours a night, 2 nights a week. Or however long the show is, whenever it broadcasts. No. No. The fan base would blow up. And there's... And if this seems like a call out, if it looks like I'm calling people on the mat, it's not about any individual people. It's about attitudes. It's about presentation. But honestly, celebrity D&D cruises, I would play D&D if I could play with Satine Phoenix and Vin Diesel. Guys, you don't want to play D&D. You want to do stuff so you can be seen with the beautiful people. And the two are very different things. Because if geek properties, thanks to Marvel, thanks to Disney buying Star Wars and churning out those shit movies that they did, if geek wasn't popular right now, I guarantee you every beautiful person on Critical Role, and that includes that fake DM Matt Mercer, every Hollywood star or starlet who's, I totally play Dungeons and Dragons, every one of them would leave our hobby like rats leaving a sinking ship. You think I'm ever going to go up to Gary Con and have Satine Phoenix or Critical Role cast members or Joe Manganiello or I don't fucking know who from Hollywood come over and say, I want to sign up for your game because you're playing a module that you wrote with Gary Gygax? Fuck no. And the same goes for any of you guys doing the same thing. They're not going to come to your table. It doesn't bump their bank account up by a couple of tens of thousands of dollars to be seen with their sleeves rolled up, sweating it out in the Tomb of Horrors, or traipsing through the keep on the Borderlands. Look, play D&D, enjoy D&D. But that's my gatekeeping polemic, people. I ranted about this the other night, or the other afternoon. Yeah, I do gatekeep. I gatekeep people's expectations. Your expectation when you sit down to play D&D is that you sit down and you play Dungeons and Dragons. You sit down and you play Dungeons and Dragons. Your expectation should not be that you get boosts on Twitter and Instagram and likes on Facebook. Your expectation should be that you killed the dragon, that you went up against the giants, that you survived the Tomb of Horrors, that you got Wave, Whelm, and Black Razor out of White Plume Mountain. Your expectation should be that you built friendships with people at the table, that your play acumen increased, that you walked away with a smile on your face. Not that you were seen with the right people doing the right things. And only gaming with the beautiful people. If that's what you're sitting down to play D&D for, then 2 words, fuck off. Go find something else to do. Go back to wine tastings and art gallery premieres. Go buy another luxury antique car and then call yourself a car enthusiast when you've never picked up a wrench in your life. But if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to play, not to appear to look good, not to be seen with the right people, If you want to play D&D, then shut up and sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons. Don't come to the table ready to be a movie star or to be seen with the movie stars. Because your mind is somewhere else. Your mind is not on the table. I was fortunate enough to play a few sessions of D&D with Gary Gygax before he passed away. The first time, I geeked out a little bit. I was like, I'm playing D&D with Gary Gygax. And I even got to say, Gary, can I borrow your player's handbook? And he handed it to me. And then I got over it. And then he and Rob Kuntz proceeded to wipe our party out on the first level of his revised Castle Greyhawk map. And that was the end of that. And every time after that, I was just like, cool. Because I like Gary's play style. That's why I kept going back. That's why I kept playing in another couple of sessions that Gary ran. No, Ricky. Ricky asked, so you feel left out or excluded because of the greater adoption of D&D by famous people? No. Jehovah, hello. No, I don't feel left out. I happily stand out. My problem, Ricky, is that there are people, young people who are still young enough to give a shit, who would see what is being presented as Dungeons and Dragons and think to themselves, I'm never going to be able to do that because I'm not one of the beautiful people. I'm not Alame stock photo model good looking enough to get into a D&D game. Look, have you seen Critical Role? Do you think I could hack it in a D&D group? Have you seen the bunch of people in the big games? My problem is not me. I don't give a shit. I have 13 dedicated players. 13 who show up every Monday night. I don't have to natter them with phone calls. I don't have to beg them. I run a fucking fantastic first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game. And I have a line of people as long as my arm playing week in and week out. And when they can't, when some of them can't make it, they tell me that they regret not being there, and please send them one of the game updates that I send out. My problem is not me. My problem is people that might look at something like Critical Role or the famous people tables and think, if I can't do that, I guess I don't get to play D&D. That's my problem. Games like mine, where I have literally said before, if you're interested in playing in my D&D game, PM me and I'll work you in. That's the kind of game that I run. My concern is that that's never going to get heard. And that other people who run great 1E games are never going to get players. People come to me and they say, how in the hell did you get 12 players? How has your game been going since 2014? First edition AD&D, 12 players, and your campaign is 7 years long? How did you even do that? I can't get 2 people on, one night a month at my local game store to play a game with me. Those are the people I'm concerned for. Because there might be a raft of people wanting to play D&D. But thanks to Matt Mercer, thanks to the beautiful people, they won't even come forward because their perception of D&D has been tainted by things like Critical Role, by things like the Beautiful People Gaming Society. It's not Freaks and Geeks. It's not the end of Freaks and Geeks. I don't know what it is. It just analogy fails me. Music is better when ugly people are allowed to make it. Yeah. I mean, there are exceptions. I mean, Robert Plant's devilishly handsome. I think I can say that. I'm comfortable saying that. But yeah, I mean, Mick Jagger, blah. Keith Richards, double, blah. People ask me what I want out of this hobby. And I often kind of stumble over answering that correctly. I mean, if there was a wish granter, I'm going to dip into the realm of science fiction here. If you've never read Roadside Picnic, you owe it to yourself to read Roadside Picnic. It is a Russian science fiction novel. There are English translations, and it is universal enough that you don't feel inured in the Russianness of it. And in Roadside Picnic, there is an anomalous zone where there was a UFO event, and there are physics anomalies throughout it. And you have to be able to navigate through all these strange areas. And some of them can crush you down to being as thin as a sheet of paper, rip you apart, electrocute you, suffocate you, age you instantly. But it's rumored at the center that there's this thing called the Wish Granter. And the main character navigates through it. And I'm going to spoil the book a little bit. If you want to mute the audio. If you want to mute the audio and not hear what I'm about to say, I understand. At the end of the book, Red, the main character, who has navigated through this nightmare landscape, a tomb of horrors. It's like getting to the center of the Tomb of Horrors. And he reaches the wish granter and he grasps it and he realizes that he can make one wish. And he thinks of all the people that he wronged to get to the wish granter and the people who told him what he should wish for. Like, when you get to the wish, I'm going to give you a map to the wish granter. And when you get there, wish for this. And then I'll break some off for you. And so on and etc. And he's finally got the wish granter. And he thinks about it all. And as he's in pain because he's been seared by radiation, he simply says, I want everyone to be happy and freedom and free things for all. That's it. That's what Red wishes for. And the book ends there. It doesn't tell us that the wish granter actually grants that wish. But That's my answer. All right. What do I want out of D&D? I want everybody to play. I want everybody to play and be happy and enjoy Dungeons and Dragons. I don't want barriers to entry. I don't want somebody to sit back and say, those are the beautiful people, therefore I can't play D&D. I don't want people to think that if they can't sit down and game with Joe Manganiello, Satine Phoenix, Stefan Pokorny, and Luke Gygax, that if they can't get into that table or afford a fucking celebrity D&D cruise, that they can't play D&D. I want that perception to forever disappear. I want all the barriers to drop. I want the sole barrier to be, do you want to play first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or original Dungeons and Dragons, or basic Dungeons and Dragons, or 2E or 3E? Whatever is being run, do you want to play it? Or are you not even concerned about that? You just want to play D&D. And if the answer is yes, then you sit down and play. That's it. Period. I don't want people thinking that if they don't play D&D with the beautiful people, they're not really playing D&D. Or if they're not playing exactly like Critical Role, that they're not playing D&D. That's what I want. That's what I want out of this hobby. That is my evangel. I want free play for everyone and everyone to be happy at the table. From upright walking toads like me to supermodels and everybody in between. But nobody should ever look at Critical Role, at I'm sorry to use this term, starfuckers playing D&D and think, I can't compete with that. Why bother? Or I can't get into that game, so I'm just not going to try. Why not just play RPGs? Because I love D&D first and foremost, Ricky. But if it's role-playing games for you, then it's role-playing games for you. Just a passerby. Spares me to watch that slow Russian movie. But gosh dang it, Stalker should be a movie that you watch at least once. Yeah, you could cut 90 minutes out of it and make a really brilliant movie, but there's parts of it that are funny. Not a lot, but there are a few blackly humorous bits in it. But anyway. So that's kind of what inspired me. Just the talk today in the Discord. Sorry, little hiccup there, guys. Sometimes we have little oops in the studio feed. So that's me. That's what I'm all about. And you guys can take that for what it's worth from the Dungeon Delver. Thoughts on travel and distances? We got plenty of time. Dude, dissing celebrity D&D, but make me watch movies like Stalker. Next, you'll say Alphaville is a masterpiece. No, I won't. Alphaville is terrible. Don't watch it. See? Alphaville. Don't watch Alphaville. Watch La Jetée instead. There. I just saved you like almost 3 hours of watching. Um, Thoughts on travel and distances, like um, you mean like when we were talking about travel and distances, like how far you might go? What was it? Um, like I have a friend who lives in South Orange County. Hi, Kevin. And I used to play D&D, or well, we played lots of different games. He was big on Hero System, but 2 weeks out of the month, I would go and visit him for his game. Um, that was a round trip of 56 miles. And given traffic in this town, well, I say it was 56 miles. It may have been more. It may have been more, but it was. I was easily going 150 miles a week with traffic and all other things considered. Um, I mean, there were some times when I just say, look, and like back in 2008 when gas was uh, a little more expensive than it is now, I was telling him, hey, look, man, I can't make it. And even though myself and three of the four other people that I game with on Thursday nights are all located in the same town, one of them is just in like the next little borough over. Uh, you know, we're on Discord and Roll20. That's our well. We're sorry, Rusty. We're on Discord and oh damn it, what is it? Not Astral. Uh, we're on a virtual tabletop. That's not Roll20. He was talking about my trek to Northwest Arkansas. Yeah, morning commutes, vacations, etc. Um, I used to work for NASA. Um, Not Justin LaNASA, but NASA. When I got that job, I was so elated to work for the space program that I didn't care about the commute. I'll tell you guys a funny story about that. So I had to be in the office at 8:30, and I live in Central Florida, and KSC, Kennedy Space Center, is it's not nearby. It's about 40 miles in one direction, 45 miles, which means bed no later than 9, up no later than 5, which I realize for a lot of people is that's very, very normal. For me, it was a jolt at the time. It was before my now oldest daughter was born, so we were still dual income, no kids. But I knew it was out there. So when I got the job, I was just I could not contain how happy I was. And I packed up my lunch and I got everything and I drove. And this is before cell phones were a ubiquitous thing for us. This is 2003, right? So no iPhone, smartphones really weren't a thing. But I had a brick mobile phone that I took with me because my wife was pregnant and she was fairly well along in her pregnancy. So you're quite welcome, Ricky. Thank you for stopping by and providing some insight. But I gathered up my stuff and I was just elated. I was so happy. I was shaking. The money was just phenomenally good. And I drove out there and I got 15, 20 miles from home. And it was before my wife had even gotten out the front door. And I realized I've left without any paperwork or any directions. I had printed all the stuff out, all the stuff that Boeing would need, all the stuff that NASA would need, the directions to get. I knew it was out east, Cape Kennedy or KSC being out on the coast. I knew it was in that direction. I knew I'd have to get on the big east-west highway here. It's Highway 50 to get out there. So I'm nearing East Central Florida, and I realize I don't have anything they need. So I stop, I pull over in a parking lot, and I pray to God, because I mean, at this point, it would be 20 minutes back to my house, and then 20 minutes back to that point, and then probably another 45 minutes of driving in front of me, right? I would be like a half an hour late my first day on the job. So I pull over and I call, and my wife is home, and God bless Mrs. the Dungeon Delver. Because I had, for some reason, I had paper in the car enough to write down all of the information and to basically handwrite the form that I needed to take to Boeing. So I sat there for about 10 minutes on the phone with a pencil. I don't even think there was a pen in the car. It was a pencil. And I wrote down all the directions, all the information that they wanted. You know, I had to like write down all my job references and everything like that on the piece of paper before I got to the Space Center, which it was a Boeing office that was near it. And then from there we drove to KSC. But I was in such a panic. I was in such a tizzy, and it was crazy. And I went out there and I worked. We went into the orientation at Boeing. We arrived on site probably just before 10 o'clock, had lunch out there, got to work. I mean, your first day on the job is really not anything, right? You know, you're learning the ropes, you're meeting people, you're talking to people. I didn't want to appear to be that guy, so, you know, stayed there until 5 o'clock. If you've never been to Kennedy Space Center, it's a base. It's a quasi-military base. You are deep inside of it. There is no, oh, well, guys, I'm going to go to McDonald's for lunch, or I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A, or I'm going to go. No. There's 3 or 4 base-run restaurants. You don't go off reservation to lunch, because off reservation, it's like 8 miles to the main gate. And then from there, you know, because of range safety, they're not going to park a McDonald's like right next to the Kennedy Space Center. So I go out and, you know, my first day, I leave at 5 o'clock. I didn't get home till like almost 7:30 that night. I'm like, is this how the rest of the world lives? Well, what I realized was that as a contractor, people just didn't give a shit about me. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, I just pushed my start time further and further back. So I would leave the house at no later than like 4:55, 5 o'clock in the morning. Nobody on the road. I would bomb down there in my little red Honda, little 4-speed Honda Civic coupe, blasting music. And this stretch of highway, it's called Highway 50. It's between Orlando. Well, it runs across the state, but it's not like the main drag anymore. But you'd get out in the boondocks, out in the piney woods between East Orlando, a place called Bithlo, and I-95 to where it starts to split off to US 1 and Cape Kennedy and so on and etc. The gap in between there, like the 25 or 30 mile gap in between those two spots, in the mornings, there was me, delivery trucks, and the highway patrol. I would bomb down that stretch of road at 80 miles an hour, and the highway patrol just didn't care. Never got pulled over, never saw anyone get pulled over. But two scary things happened on that stretch of road one morning. A hurricane, a messy tropical storm. When I say hurricane, although it did damage the VAB, the vehicle assembly building, that giant, like, unimaginably huge building out there. The tide and winds came in and did damage the metal siding on that building a little bit. But the day before that storm broke in mid-October, I went out there and people were like, "Why are you here? You're a contractor. Go home." I was like, "Well, no, I'm going to finish out the day at least." So I stayed until like 3. But that morning going out there, there was no moon, nothing. I'm blasting up the highway and I'm like, it's just dark, little swatches of fog and cloud just blowing past me. It's just pitch black in front of me. And I'm like looking into a tunnel. And I overdrove my headlights. And with about 25 yards to go, which is no reaction time at all when you're going fast on a highway in the dark, I realized that the darkness in front of me is a truck full of cut saplings that are hanging off the back of his bed or his trailer to the point that they have draped over his license plate, his reflectors, and his taillights. I nearly, I had time to ease off the gas and downshift. But if I had been a little bit sleepier, and the other scary time, I'll tell you this when we wrap up with this story. Once you get into Brevard County, it's not Brevard, it's not Brevard, it's Brevard County. There's a place where Highway 50 crosses the St. Johns River. Although at that point, it has split into a lot of sawgrass fens. It's not really a well-defined, broad, deep body of water like you normally think of a river. It's many tributaries just kind of going through fields, but it still crosses over it. I got my air conditioning on. I'm blasting some music. And I get up to that point, and it kind of curves slightly as you come up over the bridge. And I'm like, it's kind of foggy this morning. But as soon as I get up on that curve up onto the bridge, the inside and outside of my windows immediately cover with totally opaque condensation. I have zero time. I hit the wipers. I start slowing down. The wipers are doing nothing because a fog bank has just moved in over the bridge. Zero. And I mean, like, you stick your arm out in front of you and you can't see it. Zero visibility. And I'm running the wipers trying to see through my windows, and every time I wipe it just right back in where like maximum heat, maximum defrost. Both windows are up. So I'm sitting there. By the time I got to the other side of the bridge, I was coming out of the fog and my windows were finally starting to clear up. It had to have been like 120 degrees dry heat in my car at that point. Just crazy times. Crazy times. Here's a little D&D connection. That autumn was when I interviewed Gary Gygax, and I played the audio for you guys before. I may do it again someday. But that autumn was when I interviewed Gary, autumn of 2002. And I worked with a young lady. One of the places that I worked at the Cape was an office area. It was like a giant office area that had been cubicle farms, but they had removed all the cubicle walls to basically make a big warehouse where they stored systems furniture and gave me a bunch of desks that I could pile computers on and install Windows 2000. It was that long ago. NASA was still using Windows 2000. They didn't trust Windows XP, rightly so. It would be like Service Pack 5 before Windows XP got safe. But using Windows or doing these Windows 2000 installs, they had an admin in there with me. I don't know why she was there. I don't know what she was doing. But anyway, so the admin was a huge Harry Potter nerd. And I remember going in one day, it was the Friday before or something like that, and I asked her, I said, hey, I'm going to talk to the guy who created Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to interview him for my website. And she said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. So I said, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? She said, yeah, ask him what his favorite fantasy book and movie is. And wouldn't you know it, Gary's favorite fantasy movie was Harry Potter. His second favorite was the Lord of the Rings films. But Gary's favorite fantasy movie, Harry Potter. She was as pleased as punch. And she and I got on really well until I just went in one day and she wasn't there. She was off to some other part of the Cape doing other things. And it was just little old me in this giant warehouse-sized office space with nobody else. Until I went back over to the next building. And let's be clear, folks. When I say the next building, I'm talking about a building that's like a half a mile away. I worked in two buildings. The ONC, Operations and Control, and the SSPF, Space Station Production Facility. And they're right next to each other. They're a half a mile apart. They literally had a bus service that would take you from one building to the next out there. So yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, in the SSPF, just because they didn't know where to put me, they gave me an office. They gave me an office that like a NASA administrator would have, because it was like a corner looked out on the swamps. I could see the SSPF through one window. Through the other, I could see Pad 39A. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty high living. Now, with the exception of a little space around my desk, they filled it with desks and computers that I had to work on. So it was more of a workshop. They didn't have any other use for it, and they gave it to me. So there's something to be said for winding up as like a 4-month contractor. Although I did apply for full time, it didn't work out. But it was the best job I've ever had. But that is the story. That there are some travel stories. There are some commute stories. Oh, but I forgot to tell you. So I would get up. I would leave here no later than like 5 minutes to 5 or 5 a.m. So I could get there. So I could actually make it to the Cape no later than 7 in the morning, 7:30 to start my work. So I could leave no later than 4:15 or so that by the time I got back into the Orlando area, I was still just ahead of rush hour traffic. Leave before and arrive before rush hour traffic. I adjusted my own schedule and it worked beautifully. Nobody ever came looking for me. Nobody ever said, why weren't you here at 5 o'clock? You know, it was 4:45. Where were you? That was it. That's the NASA story. So I will leave you there then. But I will leave you with this. If somebody comes to you and says, I want to play D&D, but I don't think it'll be as good as Critical Role, gently bring them to your gaming group and say, Critical Role is not Dungeons and Dragons. D&D is something a lot more fun and it's a lot better. And show them a good D&D game. I don't care if you're playing OD&D, AD&D, Basic D&D, 2nd edition AD&D, 3rd edition, 3.5, Pathfinder, yes, even 4th edition or 5th edition. Show them what real Dungeons and Dragons is and let them know they don't have to be one of the beautiful people to play and enjoy D&D. Thank you all very much for stopping by today, guys. I love you. I appreciate it. It's good to see you all here today. Have a fantastic day going forward. I got to go buy some tools to smooth out this armor with. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to create a lot of lovely dust. So have a great day. Have a blast. Have a fantastic time. I'll see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow, we are playing Dungeons & Dragons live. No beautiful people, just 1st edition AD&D. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Be here for that. You guys have a great afternoon. Peace.